The Home Secretary has signed a new deal in Rwanda with hopes to revive the government's deportation plan to the African country. The treaty would see British officials and lawyers stationed in the country to help process claims. Yesterday, James cleverly unveiled a new 5-point plan to slash migration by 300,000. And to talk about this and much more, I'm joined by writer and broadcaster Candice Holdsworth, Deputy Political Editor at The Sun, Ryan Saby, and historian indeed, and broadcaster Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Rafe, I should start with you since I mispronounced historian. History is a very funny thing, isn't it? We're not sure that Mr. Cleverly is making any history, but it was pointed out by Piers Morgan earlier today, when you've got 3 Home Secretaries who have gone out to Rwanda, which is actually more than any of the deportees, you might have a bit of a problem.
It's not history, it's Groundhog Day, I think. Yes, on that level,
yes.
Absolutely. I mean, look, from day one, Rwanda was a distraction. Rwanda is a teaspoon being used to empty a swimming pool. And it's still yet more bread and circuses. The idea that a single plane is going to take off by the spring is for the birds, appropriately. And actually, that's one of the reasons why people are suggesting there may be a spring election, because the government's so worried that there'll be no takeoffs by the spring. They may want to get in an election before then. But what this does show, it's nice to see actually some decent conservative principles here, but it's far too late. And what the last 2 days have shown is that for all the talk of Suella Braverman being an extremist, being incompetent and unsuited for her position, being a lightweight compared to Sunak, the heavyweight, they've actually proven in the last 2 days that she was right all along. And if they had followed her advice, the 6 times she proposed all of this, they wouldn't have 15% of their voters going off to the Reform Party.
Yes.
And I just hope that no one actually falls for this again, because 2010, 15, 17 and 19, every Tory manifesto, they've pledged to bring immigration down. It's now 3 times what it was in 2019. Not the tens of thousands they promised, 1.3 million gross. We must never fall for their lies again.
Well, I think that's very well put. Ryan, talking of an early election, I mean, the Tories are sort of staggering around trying to look for the best, worst-case scenario, aren't they? It's not like, when are we going to be popular? It's like, when are we not going to be so unpopular that nobody will vote for us at all?
Yeah, that's the calculation Downing Street must be going through every single day. Do we go in the spring or do we wait until the autumn? But the trouble is, when you're 20 points behind in the polls and it doesn't look like they're closing anytime soon, you're in no man's land. It's really, really, really tricky. And there's so many MPs who are going to lose their seats. But I think Rishi Sunak, back in the back of his mind, you do wonder, he thinks, if I can just get over the 2-year mark, that'll be maybe beneficial to him long term. When he's being introduced on the world stage, this is a man who stood, great, United Kingdom Prime Minister for 14 months. Doesn't quite sound as good as the 2 years. So you just wonder.
Who is the next sort of least serving Prime Minister after Liz Truss? Who served the shortest amount of time?
You're testing me now, and I'm going to have to look that one up.
Have a look. Tell me later. But I mean, it's an interesting one. It might well be Rishi Sunak by the end of whatever happens, because it seems to me there's now sort of Tories, Candice, who are saying quite openly, we're not going to let you rip up the Supreme Court ruling. We're not going to let you send anyone to Rwanda. So not only now have we got the lefty lawyers, we've got Gary Lineker, we've got half the Tory party in Westminster saying you can't do it.
Yeah, the different factions in the Conservative Party, and in particularly the One Nation Tories, who I think can kind of smell a bit of weakness now.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people are starting to turn against the Rwanda deal. They're wondering if it's even practical.
Yeah.
There have been reports that Rwanda itself is souring on it.
Yeah.
And so now I think maybe they see it's
their
time to move. Yes,
I mean,
but it doesn't. But the Supreme Court, from what I know, I don't know the exact legal nitty-gritty. They could still get involved at some point. But this is a real issue that needs to be solved. I mean, the fact of the matter is, with illegal immigration, if you're not allowing people to stay here, you need to find a safe third country for them to go to.
Right.
And if no other country like Rwanda wants to do a deal, what do you do?
I mean, I was reminded of what other countries do just this very weekend. I flew to Kennedy Airport on Friday, and as I was standing waiting in the queue, where you're made to feel very much that you're going to be let in if they like the look of you and you're not if they don't. There was an elderly woman who had come from the Dominican Republic, and she had a younger daughter or somebody with her. And the guy was giving her a really hard time in the desk, because he's like, we need to see your return ticket. Where is your return ticket? And she's like going like this, trying to look through her phone. And I'm going, she's not getting in. And that's a proper border. We don't seem to have any of those anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and there are countries, of course, in Africa and the Middle East where if your application for asylum in the UK, for example, has been rejected, they won't allow you off the plane when you're sent back. So where do those people go? There does need to be a third-party solution to all of this, or, as some of us suggested from the beginning, to avoid all of the legal quagmire the government's found itself in, use the Ascension Islands as a processing centre. You know, it's 2,000 miles off away from the UK. But the island of Nauru was over 1,000 miles off the coast of Australia, also very sparsely populated. And it's the building of those sorts of processing centres which will act as a proper deterrent compared to what we have at the current time.
But have we got, Ryan, a government which is now clinging on to this Rwandan thing because they're hoping against all of the odds and against hope and against their own people that it will somehow work? But even if it did work, even if they got one plane to fly there in the spring with 40 people on it, which is a pretty far away possibility, it seems to me, it's not going to make any difference to the electoral enthusiasm to vote for them. And it's certainly not going to put any kind of a mark or a hole in the probably now, 200,000 people waiting for us an asylum application.
This has just become totemic, and you just feel like Rishi Sunak is digging in day by day. He would love to see those planes take off. He's talking about the spring. I was with him, I remember going to Dover with him about a year ago, and he says they're definitely going to go by. That was last summer. So, I mean, we're still in the same position. We're still going to be in the same position probably this time next year. But the trouble is he's got problems with illegal migration, legal migration, and the asylum backlog. So he's got everything coming at him from all different fronts. And then he's got the emergency legislation. So when he brings that in...
Yeah, what's happened to that?
We think it may come as early as Thursday. Okay. Or it may drift into next week. But the trouble is with that, he's going to annoy some of his cabinet, some of his junior ministers, or some of his backbenchers. Some of them are going to walk away, you'd have thought. You know, are they going to side with the Robert Jenrick, who seems to, again, digging his heels in? Or is the likes of Alex Chalk, a lawyer, a KC, it's just not going to stand for Britain disapplying or walking away from the European Convention, or leaving the European Convention of Human Rights? So it's going to be a balancing act for Rishi Sunak over the next few days.
And Candice, how much of this will lead into the next battle for leader? Because can you see a moment where Rishi Sunak is kind of forced out before the next election?
I can definitely imagine it. I don't know if Tory MPs will actually go for it, though. I mean, that would be entering the realm of the absurd.
Yeah.
Yet another Conservative leader gone. But I think, as everyone's been saying, you're starting to see people come to the forefront and they're taking political risks. And they may be going against him a little bit. You know, with all the immigration stuff, the James Cleverly's 5 points, that was pushed on Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
That was Tories from the right saying, no, we want to do this. He initially wasn't happy. And you think, well, they're doing that to sort of raise their profile. Right. There's definitely an electoral strategy there.
And there's obviously history for this in the Tory party, Rafe, isn't there, where, you know, they start to kind of assemble their troops and the Trojan horse is discovered and used for some reason or other. Somebody asks an awkward question, you know, there's a lot of, you know, sort of cabal-like meetings being held behind closed doors and in strange restaurants up and around Westminster. They're very good at this, the Tories. They're good at stitching each other up. I mean, that's kind of their speciality now.
It's their raison d'etre, but it's also why it's the world's most successful political party. And normally they'd be well advised not to have another leadership convention so close to another election. But then you think, actually, how bad can it get? Well, they're facing a near extinction level event at the next election. Yeah. So actually, who knows whether it might be a safe option to actually jettison Sunak or not? Because I think it'll be silly. But either way, they're going to be eight former prime ministers standing on Remembrance Sunday next year by the cenotaph.
But this is the thing. I mean, there will come a point, I'm sure, Ryan, you'll be able to answer this, where perhaps somebody says, well, maybe the biggest liability we have is Rishi Sunak. And, you know, how much worse would it be to put somebody else in who might just be a bit more palatable, who might just be somebody that can be a bit more enthusiastic about the Tory cause, a bit more enthusiastic about what they're supposed to stand for? I don't know what Rishi Sunak stands for. I don't think anybody does.
I think realistically, if it does come to another leader, I think that leader would have to call a general election pretty quickly. You can't have...
Oh, yeah, straight away.
But I think the worst thing and the thing in the background for Rishi Sunak is annoying so many different individual groups in the Conservative Party that you stumble towards a leadership election. He will win that leadership election or the vote of confidence, but do you really want someone who's so badly damaged by his party going into a general election? It would be horrendous for them.
Yeah.
Big distraction.
It'd be terrible.
This is where I roll out my conspiracy theory about David Cameron. The real reason he was brought in was because he actually did win an election for the Tory party. Maybe, just maybe, that's not as mad as it used to sound about 2 weeks ago.
No, because they looked to the past when things were successful.
Right.
No ideas for the future.
It's
no
like
big
the way
vision.
the Labour Party wistfully looks upon Tony Blair. Like, no matter what happens to Keir Starmer, if he does manage to win an election, he'll be the first Labour leader to win an election since Tony Blair. And that's a long time ago.
But it's a complete failure to understand that the tectonic shift in the actual makeup of the political parties in terms of their voting base. And what it actually means, Cameron's appointment to the House of Lords, is that they've completely abandoned the Red Wall, even though they've actually already been abandoned by the Red Wall.
Yeah.
And they just want to shore up the blue wall. This is simply a defensive strategy to retain what little remnants of a party they have left.
Yes. And meanwhile, all the stuff that goes around the noise of the migration issue is still going to trouble them. We've got another doctor's strike announced today. NHS doctors are going to go on strike effectively for 2 weeks because they're going to go out on the 20th, which means 3 days, 20, 21, 22. Then you're into, you know, basically just before Christmas. So they don't have to work Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, maybe back on the 27th. And then, you know, by then you're kind of into New Year, don't really do very much. I mean, they're basically off for 2 weeks. And then they're saying another 6-day strike in the new year. It's horrendous.
Yeah, probably hoping to apply maximum pressure during the winter when the NHS does come under a lot of pressure from all the virus.
But it's always the same. It's always about to fall over, isn't it? I mean, every single year, this is the end of the NHS. 24 hours to save the NHS, that was Ed Miliband, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a difficult situation. But the junior doctors don't want to lose public support by going going on strike over that time. But Rishi Sunak's got the other problem of he wants to reduce the waiting lists.
Yeah.
So the more time the junior doctors spend out not at work, it's going to make it even more difficult to reduce that number.
Oh, yeah.
Up to 6 or 7 million on those waiting lists.
It will be awful.
And this is designed to cause maximum damage, of course, because already people have their holidays booked in the NHS.
Yeah.
You've got bank holidays already there.
Right.
So they know exactly what they're doing. And let's not forget, of course, that the BMA has been captured by momentum elements.
Yes.
It's very much a
totally.
left-wing dominated union. Not all doctors are on side with this. And of course, also don't forget, although their starting salary is £29,000 a year, by the third year of being a junior doctor, they're earning £40,000. But actually, it's more like 55,000 when you get into all the extra pay for unsocial work. And by the 5th year, they're earning about 70,000 in real terms, 55 base salary. So, I mean, it's not much hardship. It was far worse back in the 1970s and 80s when people worked twice as long and were earning about £20,000 in today's wages.
Yes.
So you may ask whether it's a bit of
I
a
think they've lost
issue going on
I
here.
think they've lost it very much already. But guys, thank you very much indeed. My panel will be back later on, of course.